Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jarod Facundo and Lucas Goldstein of The American Prospect on Brandon Johnson's massive victory in Chicago's mayoral race. But meanwhile, former President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty to 34 felonies in Manhattan yesterday for allegedly falsifying business records. And in a massive win for Democrats, progressive Brandon Johnson has defeated cop union-endorsed Paul Vallis in Chicago's mayoral election. As I mentioned, we'll be speaking about that with our guests. And more great news, Janet Protasewicz has won her race for the Wisconsin Supreme Court, flipping the court liberal for the first time since 2008. However, a Republican is narrowly ahead in a crucial Wisconsin State Senate seat race, which would give the GOP the votes it would need for impeachment. In another legal loss for Trump, a federal appeals court has said no to his attempts to block his aides from testifying in the special counsel's stolen documents probe. A North Carolina Democratic lawmaker announced she will flip her party affiliation despite being in a very blue district that went Biden, and that will give the GOP a veto-proof majority in a state with a Democratic governor. Tennessee Republicans vote today on whether to expel 3 Democratic state lawmakers for daring to protest for gun reform. Kansas GOP lawmakers have sent a ban on trans women in female spaces to the Democratic governor's desk. Let's hope she vetoes. And North Dakota has advanced a bill attacking trans rights as Florida moves forward its broader ban on gender-affirming care for minors. Johnson & Johnson was forced to pay $8.9 billion to tens of thousands of people for talcum powder causing cancer. A federal appeals court has punted a case that would have granted due process rights to Guantanamo prisoners. And lastly, it's a yearly tradition. Israeli forces have raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the middle of Ramadan, attacking Palestinian worshippers. All this and more on today's Majority Reports. It's Hump Day, baby! It is Hump Day! And a glorious Hump Day it is, because we have more news in the first hour of this program than I can remember in a long period of time. I mean, this should be a Tuesday news day, but obviously it's unfortunate that they chose to drop all this news on us on the day after. It doesn't fit exactly in the Majority Report branded day schedule, but, we'll take it. Sam's out for Passover, obviously, and he's also out because, the universe just says when news is as big as possible, it needs to fall on me hosting solo. And we have the extra sweetener of it just being myself and Bradley in studio because Matt is still on grand jury duty.
Sam's timing as it relates to huge breaking news developments coinciding with his absence is becoming almost surgical at this point.
Almost suspicious. I mean, we were suspicious when Rush Limbaugh died and Sam was out of town. Curiously, very curiously, we not making any accusations.
The Afghanistan withdrawal, Sam on vacation.
The
war in Ukraine.
Invasion of Ukraine, Sam on vacation. And, Trump's, the true fallout from his arraignment really is going to fall on Wednesday, today, because he was in court yesterday, as I'm sure people listening or watching understand. Trump has become the first U.S. president to be criminally charged. And he's also the first president to be impeached twice. So breaking records all over the place. This all got started, just to backtrack a second, because hush money payments in and of themselves, not necessarily illegal, right? And that's what you'll hear from right-wing commentators, or what you won't hear from them, I should say, because they're trying to make it just about the surface level hush money payments. But how the ball got rolling here is that there was a report in 2018 from the Wall Street Journal which spoke about the hush money payment. That caused greater sunlight to be to shine on this case, because Trump then also violated the NDA by then speaking about it publicly. And so then Stormy Daniels sues Donald Trump. The lawsuit just opens this case up. And then you have Michael Cohen, who gets investigated, lies to investigators, ends up going to jail, ends up going to prison, I should say. And now we're at this point where the case is being explored as thoroughly as it can be. Cohen admits that Trump lied about the records of the payment, calling it legal fees. That's a federal tax violation if proven in court. And that's when this case began to unfold. Here's Alvin Bragg yesterday, after Trump appeared in court, explaining his reasoning behind the, again, 34 felony counts being leveled at the former president.
Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements about his payments to Mr. Cohen.
There you go. And there were some other revelations in the indictment, including, and when AMA, the corporation that Bragg keeps referring to, is associated with the National Enquirer. the tabloid that was participating in the catch and kill schemes on behalf of Trump.
And seemingly one of the big notable witnesses for the grand jury was David Pecker, who was the CEO of AMI.
AMI.
The parent
Did
company.
I say AMA?
Yeah, AMI.
Ask me
Yeah, ask me
anything.
anything. Here we are. The parent company of the National Enquirer. So I think, of course, as this potentially or will go to trial, I think Pecker will certainly be a pretty prominent witness for the,
which
for
is
the
interesting.
prosecution.
Yeah, they've made it clear that it's not just Cohen, that they have other people who are speaking about
That Cohen
this.
is not like entirely the linchpin of the people are of course considering him the star witness because he was Trump's fixer for so long, but Bragg seems to be telegraphing that he's not the only source for what they're going after here.
And I think it would be irresponsible for that to be the case. So I concede that's definitely there are definitely going to be more witnesses on this front. And the National Enquirer, I mean, God, the fact that they're involved in this is hilarious. Given I'm sure all of you have seen it at supermarket checkout counters. It's about aliens and fake Paul McCartneys and things like that. But this was also the tabloid that ran the story accusing Ted Cruz's father of being a part of the assassination of JFK, which then Trump ran with in the 2016 primary. So there was a symbiotic relationship at play here.
And sorry, just before we continue to get to the more serious stuff, I just want to point out what David Pecker looks like with a guy whose name is David Pecker.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he looks like Geraldo Rivera, except if Geraldo Rivera was a wasp who also is like a serial cheater.
Yeah, like, would anybody else be named David Pecker and also be the head of the company that publishes the National Enquirer
Well,
and
hello.
not look like this guy?
Is that who's that a picture of with him down there? I mean, he's just with Playboy models all over the place here.
Shockingly, with some dubious repute.
Yeah, he really looks like an extra in the background of like some sort of biopic about Hugh Hefner.
Right, or Boogie Nights or something like that. Like
Yeah.
a Laurel Canyon thing.
He's a Boogie Night. He's like the Boogie Nights guy that brings the underage girl to the party and then she ODs.
Right.
That's the vibe that you get from Pecker there. And one of the catch and kill stories from that was Trump allegedly paid $30,000 to a doorman at his building to squash a story about him having an illegitimate child, which seems to have been proven false later. But I mean, it could have been true. Just doesn't seem like it is true, based on what we know from the indictment. But here's more of Alvin Bragg explaining some of these charges against Trump regarding the falsification of business records, because as I mentioned earlier, right-wing commentators are going to try and make this all about, it's just an exchange of money between a woman and a man, and that in and of itself is not illegal. Bragg explains why that's a kind of surface level reading of it and not entirely the case.
My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge, it can be said, is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle.
So that is undoubtedly true, that the going after these kinds of white-collar crimes, falsifying records, usually that's how they can get white-collar criminals, because there's a paper trail for that. But for the most part, since our justice system's a bit more tied up in, locking up people for the consequences of their poverty, they don't go into that too much. But when they do, it's a really easy wedge into larger white-collar crime. So I think that's one of the strengths of the case, that there's a real pattern of behavior that you can show here. Trump's a crook, right? Like, this is the fact that there's 34 counts show this happened many times. And he's going to be a little bit afraid about what else this opens up, because this was routine business for a guy like Trump. And it shows, too, that Trump, when he ran in 2016, he wasn't really trying to win. Because if you were a politician, that when he initially started, I should say, he was like, this will be great for my business. I'm in the spotlight. I'll make some more money. He didn't have his crap buttoned up. That's why this was so patchwork, him having to make these hush money payments on the fly. So he created this situation by having a shady past and then choosing to run for president as a PR exercise, and then having to fix itself with his fixer Michael Cohen on the back end. But yeah, they're going to be able to show that there's a pattern of behavior. As Bradley just spoke about, it's not just the testimony of Michael Cohen. There's other witnesses. There is the paper trail, the documentation in the ledger, the fact that falsifying records is such a well-established crime that is pursued by these kinds of prosecutors in a variety of different white-collar criminal instances. And there is this unique angle to it as well, which is that it's not just the bookkeeping fraud, which is usually a misdemeanor. Bragg is indicating that he's raising this to the level of a felony because he seems to believe that he and his team can prove that the bookkeeping fraud was in service of covering up a second crime. That's how you can push it from a misdemeanor up to a felony. And that second crime appears to be campaign finance violation. So I think that stuff is where the case is, from my reading of it, from what we know, pretty strong. But people are pointing out that there are some thin details surrounding the case that I don't know if that's a prosecutorial decision in terms of strategy, or if there is not as much there as they're trying to show. Like, as I said, we all know Trump's a crook. I just want to see if some of this can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I said this on the show yesterday as well. Ellie Mistal wrote about this in The Nation. There are weaknesses to this, in that bookkeeping fraud and campaign finance violations have a 5-year statute of limitations in New York. Bragg's going to argue that the pandemic should extend that, and that also that Trump was out of state when he was president, so there's a pause in that statute of limitations. But that's going to be something that Trump's lawyers poke holes in, right? And that can apply to, from what we see now, all of these charges here. And the second is that the decision to raise it to the level of felonies means that there could be an opportunity for Trump's lawyers to say, now these are actually just misdemeanors. You can't prove this connection. I'm not sure. We'll have to see if that plays out in court or how it plays out, but it still makes it a higher bar a little bit. So I'm fascinated to see how this plays out. What also is scary for Trump is that this is not the only legal tangle that he's in right now. We know the Georgia election interference case is moving forward. We know that the special counsel investigation into his hoarding of classified documents is moving forward, and that he just had a setback because his request to block his aides from testifying has been denied. I mean, no one knows how this is going to play out, and I don't want to pretend that I do. I do know that his poll numbers have gone up in the Republican primary, and he gave a speech last night that seems to indicate that he thinks that this is a win for him, which says a lot about the Republican base. But, God, it was cathartic, let's be real, to see Trump in that courtroom, even the little glimpse that we got of him yesterday. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Hear from our sponsors, Sam from the past, telling us all about that. But also, go to shop. What is it? What's the link?
Shop.majorityreportradio.com.
There we go. Because there are limited edition shirts that I think everyone is going to be interested in checking out. A horse pace loving podcaster named Joe Rogan called Sam a effing dork recently. Wouldn't refer to him by name, even though we know he knows his name, just like there's video evidence of it. They played softball together, all that kind of stuff. Too afraid to say Sam's name, which is a consistent through line with right wingers. So we decided to monetize this wonderful moment. And these shirts are limited edition, so you got to get them quickly. Got to be quick. Go to shop.majorityreportradio.com. Check out these shirts. Get them while you can. Some of our best merch, I got to say. So shop.majorityreportradio.com. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we are going to be speaking about the Wisconsin Supreme Court race.
Hey, one of our sponsors today is Nutrafol. Now, this is going to seem a little bit weird, okay? Because you remember Nutrafol advertised on this program years ago. I tried to get Michael to use it. He wasn't that interested. I had heard a bunch of stories about Nutrafol working well, and they came back and they advertised on the show. I don't know. This was like in the fall. And Emma had heard, knew someone who had used it with a lot of success. The Nutrafol is basically a #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement. It's not drugs, it's vitamins. It's clinically shown to improve your hair growth, thickness, visible scalp coverage for both men and women. Emma knew a woman who had some benefit with it. And I had a friend who knew somebody who had a lot of benefit with it. And so I decided to start taking it. I know people say that my hair's not thinning, but it's up here. I mean, longtime viewers will know that my hair's, receded over the years. And I was like, you know what? It's getting a little bit thin on this side in particular. And so I started to take it. And then I realized I'm taking the old bottles and they've completely expired. I mean, years and years ago. So I bought a couple of more bottles. I've been taking it really for the past almost like 4 or 5 months. And I have to tell you, it has worked. My hair is thicker. I can see a lot of like tinier hairs that are developing around here. It's gotten thicker in here. I can feel like less of a difference. This is natural medical grade ingredients. They have had clinical studies which have shown that 72% of men have more scalp coverage. 86% of women saw improved hair growth. This is after 6 months. Nutrafol is trusted and recommended by more than 3,000 top doctors. And you can grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com, entering the promo code MAJORITY, save $15 off your first month subscription. This is their best offer anywhere, and it's only available to U.S. customers for a limited time. Plus, you get free shipping on every order. Get $15 off at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY. We'll put a link in the podcast and YouTube description. And I don't know, my attitude was just like, I better do this before it's a problem. And I'm pretty psyched I did. Hey, folks. This one of today's sponsor is a product that it came out of an experiment that I did when a buddy of mine gave me some cannabis seeds, and I planted them, and they grew into big plants, but I didn't sex them properly. Apparently, there's male and female cannabis plants, and when you don't sex them, what you get at the end of that process is a bunch of seeds. But my loss, your gain, because my buddy was like, we can sell these. These are great seeds. So if you go to Cedars Seeds, SEDERS seeds.com, you can purchase a packet, 6 seeds. Check your local regulations, see if you're allowed to do, outdoor growing, your own growing. Some places you can, some places you can't. In New York, you can. 6 plants, and check it out. If you use the coupon code SEEDS, You're not only going to get the special Majority Report 15% discount that we got running right now, you'll also get free shipping. So check it out, cedarsseeds.com. Oh, and use that. Use that. You can just put your phone right up that on that. Check it out.
We are back, thanks to Nutrafol and Cedar Seeds. So let's talk about this enormous win in Wisconsin here. The liberal candidate in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, Janet Protasewicz, I hope I'm saying her name correctly, has won. And this is just incredibly exciting because Protasewicz now, with her victory over a conservative former Justice Dan Kelly, who's an election denier and was backed by anti-abortion groups, that flips the state Supreme Court for the first time since 2008. And there are a lot of things that the Supreme Court can rule over, which includes abortion in the state. There's a 19th century abortion ban that is at issue right now that the state Supreme Court could essentially nullify and codify the right to abortion in the state of Wisconsin. It literally passed a year after Wisconsin became a state, and Republicans in Wisconsin are trying to make it into the law of the land, law of the state. But also just the incredibly aggressive right-wing gerrymandering district lines that have cemented a disproportionate Republican takeover of the state government. And it's just been years and years and years of activism and organizing to attempt to claw that back. Because even though the state really is much bluer than the state government would indicate because of how gerrymandered it is, it's difficult to overcome that, because you need a lot of money, you need a lot of resources, and you need a lot of turnout. And for Protasewicz, apparently the turnout was so significant for her, not just in Madison and Milwaukee, which are liberal areas of the state, but she also made gains that were surprising in some of the state's smaller cities and in rural areas of the state, which wasn't necessarily expected. So here is Protasewicz, after winning the special election for the state Supreme Court, at her victory party, speaking about the meaning, the importance behind her win.
So finally, to the people of this beautiful state of Wisconsin, I thank you. Today's results mean two very important and special things. First, it means that Wisconsin voters have made their voices heard. They've chosen to reject partisan extremism in this state. And second, it means our democracy will always prevail. Too many have tried to overturn the will of the people. Today's results show that Wisconsinites believe in democracy and the democratic process.
Well, most Wisconsinites, not her opponent, who she defeated, we'll get to that in a sec, but it's incredible, because this means that Wisconsin, hopefully, if they move quickly, can redraw their district lines, the very gerrymandered Republican tilted ones, for the 2024 national election. But also on the state level, this means great things going forward, hopefully, for the state, because there was one small frustrating setback where in State Senate District 8, in a close election, it looks like the Republican's going to take it. And that gives the state Senate the ability to impeach the Democratic governor for God knows what reason. Is it Ewers or Evers. Gosh, again.
Quinn Ewers, Tony Evers.
This is my slow turn into Sam, right? But anyway, despite the fact that she, as of this morning, leads by 11%, with 95% counted, her opponent refuses to concede. This is Republican Daniel Kelly speaking about the results, and he is clearly not taking this loss, even though it's incredibly decisive, not taking this loss well.
And it brings me no joy to say this. I wish that in a circumstance like this, I would be able to concede to a worthy opponent. But I do not have a worthy opponent to which I can concede. This was the most deeply deceitful, dishonorable, despicable campaign I have ever seen run for the courts. It was truly beneath contempt.
Cry more.
Now, I say this not because we did not prevail. I do not say this because of the rancid slanders that were launched against me, although that was bad enough. But that is not my concern. My concern is the damage done to the institution of the court. Yes. My opponent is a serial liar. Yes. She's disregarded judicial ethics. She's demeaned the judiciary with her behavior. And this is the future that we have to look forward to in Wisconsin. I've been committed to the rule of law my entire career. I understand this to be the most fundamental, basic promise of civilization. And in its heart, it lives in the judiciary, and if not there, nowhere at all. We've had this laid out plainly for us. We could have the rule of law or the rule of Janet. And the people of Wisconsin have chosen the rule of Janet.
Dude, I don't think that's like the scary proposition that you think it is. It's not like the rule of Thanos.
A reverse Handmaid's Tale going on. He's I am a marginalized man, and the rule of Janet is here, and it is permanent. I am going to walk into the ocean now.
Bye-bye. See you later.
This crybaby loser, by the way, Daniel Kelly, just from his Wikipedia page, it's never good when you have a subsection that reads involvement in Stop the Steal movement.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly was paid $120,000 by the Wisconsin State Republican Party and the Republican National Committee as an attorney who worked on election issues in 2020 after his term with the Wisconsin Supreme Court ended because he was a former justice. In the weeks following the 2020 presidential election, he provided legal counsel to the Wisconsin GOP to overturn the 2020 election. Oh, this guy is the one who's so committed to the rule of law and to the judiciary and being wanting so badly to have a solemn and contrite concession, but he can't because Janet is so mean. Janet's so nasty, and the silly Wisconsin voters now just want the rule of Janet.
The rule of Janet. We're all living in Janet's world now, baby.
It sounds like a CBS sitcom, The Rule of Janet.
I know.
It's like now Janet's here to stay.
Exactly.
The Rule of Janet. We're coming to you live at 8 p.m.
Janet, the nanny, who's a little no-nonsense.
And she makes Daniel mad.
And the kids are just out of control, but now we have the rule of Janet in the house.
Forever.
Yeah, sorry. That's the reboot of The Nanny is the rule of Janet. I mean, like, it's just...
Cry more, buddy. Cry more, buddy.
Cry.
Seriously.
I mean, he wanted to make it sound like we were in some... God, I wish I had that soundboard. We could have played The Rose over it. But he wanted to make it sound like we were in some dystopian nightmare. Dude, the rule of the people is actually what put the rule of Janet in office. You lost by 11 percentage points.
Yeah,
you can't
it wasn't
really
even
make this case.
It wasn't like a nail biter.
No.
Like you lost by like 8 p.m., buddy.
Yeah, it was over before it even started. Seemingly,
It wasn't because Janet was so oppressive. It's because you're a huge loser.
She should make T-shirts with like a her face on it, a parental advisory thing in the bottom corner, and call it the Rule of Janet. Honestly, that's just like a free idea for you, Janet, if you run for re-election. Although that won't be for 10 years. I mean, that's a big part of why this is so massive, is because she has a 10-year term. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court has been instrumental in not just making Wisconsin much more undemocratic, but in providing the blueprint for other states to do the same. We had John Nichols on yesterday who spoke about how Wisconsin is known as the laboratory of democracy, and there's a good reason for that. We'll talk later about what's happening in North Carolina, but they took a page from Wisconsin's gerrymandering almost immediately after they did so in 2010 in the backlash to Obama, which elected these ghouls like Scott Walker, who then ended up passing right-to-work laws, gerrymandering their states to the point where they could cement Republican rule even when demographic shifts and shifts towards more liberal politics were coming down the bend. I mean, that was the reason for it. North Carolina is honestly in a very similar position on that front. Also has a Democratic governor, but a heavily Republican legislature that is getting in the way of any progressive priorities. And so having this happen in Wisconsin is important for all the reasons we just said. Abortion, election integrity, and then hopefully once these maps are redrawn, then we can get to a point where Democrats take back the state government and there's a repeal of the right to work laws that undercut unions, because Wisconsin really was ground zero for this mass anti-union state legislation across the country during that period of time. We're seeing it happen in Michigan, where it's being repealed because Democrats have taken back control of their government on the state level. This is a massive step for Wisconsin to do that in the coming years.
And just our intern Isaac texted me and pointed this out, that Dan Nodal, the guy who won that special election to preserve the supermajority in Wisconsin, he is open to the idea of impeaching state officials like Judge Janet and Tony Evers. Obviously, I'm not sure how exactly the critical mass is there for if all Wisconsin Republicans want to do it, but this just goes to show you how it's better to be in the position where these Republicans want to impeach her because she is in power, as opposed to losing outright and having no shot of a future for abortion rights and for democracy in Wisconsin.
And I'm not sure what the impeachment proceedings would entail.
Right, how that would even
I don't think
manifest
that's
itself.
Immediate expulsion, right? I mean, like, you just might get impeached. So, which it seems like they're trying to do this across the country, Republicans now. Yeah, you're going to go after Daddy Trump, we'll go after your Democrats.
We'll go after Janet.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania, they tried to go after, scary Janet. In Pennsylvania, they tried this, or didn't they do this successfully? They impeached Larry Krasner? The state Senate did. Yeah, they did. Right. But they have a Democratic governor. So lots of, I think, similar situations happening across the country right now, and Republicans who made all these gains, again, in the post-Obama backlash to having a black president, are beginning to get a little scared that Democrats have organized effectively enough to fight back against some of this. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to American Prospect Fellows Jarod Facundo and Luke Goldstein. We are back, and we are joined now by Jarod Facundo and Luke Goldstein, writing fellows at the American Prospect, who wrote about and have been covering the Chicago mayoral race. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so here we go. Big news now. Brandon Johnson officially defeated Paul Vallas. Despite Vallas outspending Brandon Johnson 2-1, being backed by the Fraternal Order of Police, the police union, the Chamber of Commerce in the state, comparing that to Brandon Johnson, who was a teachers union organizer backed by the Chicago Teachers Union, county commissioner, Working Families Party candidate. The difference could not have been starker. What are your immediate takeaways from this great victory, honestly, for progressives in the city of Chicago?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a huge upset victory for Brandon Johnson. And I think this is definitely a blow to the, sort of more conservative corporate wing of the Democratic Party, which has continually tried to use fears about crime and capital flight as well to stymie progressive candidates. And it didn't work here. Brandon Johnson ran an unabashedly left-wing campaign with union support. He ran on a pretty ambitious set of policy ideas to, reinvest in public education, reinvest in social programs, and also to implement a wealth tax to fund various projects and invest in affordable housing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jarod.
The subtext of everything that Luke is saying is that this is pushing against the Chicago political establishment. Like, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from all of this is that when it comes to like Brandon Johnson, like his base did not the coalition that brought him to victory wasn't like natural or set from the beginning. Like, he really had to assemble or like tap into the CTU's campaign infrastructure to really like turn out the vote in his favor. And being able to do that, going from like not having like the name recognition or I guess the career that Paul Vallas did in such a short amount of time really is a testament to the strength of his campaign.
Yeah, and I mean, Jarod, he started at 3% in the early rounds of voting, and he had not a ton of name recognition, and yet he was able to quickly build coalitions to advance to the runoff. I mean, how did he even get to the runoff election when there were a lot? Of course, he was running against an incumbent. The field was so crowded. There were others positioning themselves as progressives, but, we're not going to go as far on crime and stuff. How did he stand out in that field?
Yeah, Luke, I think because you covered the primary at first, so
Luke, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So it was a really interesting dynamic for this general race because basically in the runoff, both Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallas, drew their main support from the north side of the city, by and large. And that is more so the, affluent and kind of higher educated part of the city, which is to be expected for the primary race. Like, those are, higher propensity voters. Yeah. But the same for the general election. Brandon Johnson ran the best ground game of all the candidates and tapped into this organizing infrastructure that the Chicago Teachers Union and also the Working Families chapter, United Working Families in the city, had been really building for decades. And, took some, took kind of, riskier policy strategies. He ran on police reform, and other progressive candidates, for example, like Congressman Chuy Garcia, actually tried to kind of tack to the right with a sort of, more conservative policy of a greater police presence. And that really ended up only pushing more voters to Paul Vallas.
So that's the thing I mean, we're on the national level. I'll make this case a lot where Democrats try to appeal to right-wing talking points sometimes in certain congressional races. And my point is always, if people want Republican, they're going to go with the real thing, not the Democrat that's saying the Republican thing. And that kind of seemed to work, at least in Vallis's favor, to have him stand out. If you want to be a tough on crime vote, if you're a tough on crime voter, you were going to go to Vallis. And so do you think that for the rest of the candidates that didn't feed into that really benefited Brandon Johnson and allowed him to move forward into the 1v1 race that ended up in his victory yesterday?
I think like in respects to crime, like voters were probably able to oversee what could be perceived as like a weak stance on being tough on crime, that like voters really aren't single issue sort of people. That like, I think if you taken some what Brandon Johnson was offering, his platform of like, I don't know, like treatment over trauma and prioritizing like economic investment through like social programs and promoting public education, that the combination of those things, like whatever reservations people might have about crime, especially on in like the Black neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods where crime is experienced most heavily, the other things outweighed what the message that Vallis was trying to sell. So I don't know, it's one of those things like where I love election day because it really like puts every single person in their place to really just see how people like land on the candidates, and it kind of just shows how we can't flatten how people might think about issues.
Right. And just to kind of go off that also, I mean, you know, if you paid attention to any national headlines for either the primary or the general runoff, you know, you knew that most voters in Chicago said that public safety was their top concern. And people translated that as meaning, you know, we want tough on crime policies. That was at least the kind of forecast, you know. And, you know, Brandon Johnson outperformed in the primary and then in the general. And it's largely because, you know, that kind of mistranslation of what people meant by public safety is our top issue. You know, we spoke to voters on the ground for the piece that we wrote. And, you know, some of them would say, I actually like what Vallis says on crime, but there are other issues that are really important to me, you know, like education. And that's why I'm ultimately going to vote for Johnson.
Well, that was part of Johnson's strategy as well, right? I mean, you wrote about this, as you say, in your piece, about how, yes, crime or public safety was on the top of people's priority list, but he was seemingly effective in reframing the public safety issue to one where he was pitching voters on economic policies that would raise the standard of living in Chicago, and education, as you say. What were some of the strategies that you observed that Johnson deployed, and Jarod, I'll turn to you on this, that you feel might have been most effective in turning out the voters that he needed to end up victorious yesterday?
I think it really goes back to this ground game. Like we were talking to some of the organizers that really like tapped into like these Latino neighborhoods. I think the big takeaway there is I won't. Okay, before that, I won't even lie that the narrative that Brandon Johnson initially put out of trying to address the root causes of poverty, I didn't know, or I didn't suspect that it would have as much leeway and buy-in from voters, just because I think typically that Paul Vallis was able to really like define the race against Johnson as like kind of just being weak. But I guess this is me not giving enough credit to these organizers, but they really like just like honed in on how like this is like a false narrative that Vallis is pushing forward, and here is XYZ issues on why the sum of what Brandon Johnson is running on is an actual public safety it's a platform for public safety.
How much do you guys think that, Luke, I'll ask you as well, how much do you think that the high profile endorsements that Brandon Johnson got helped, including, well, Bernie Sanders for one, maybe activating some of the youth vote, and we're still getting the numbers on this, but maybe some leftist inclined people within Chicago, but also the Clyburn endorsement, which I was surprised by when it happened a few weeks ago, but that carries some weight and might carry some weight as well with maybe some donors or people outside who want to support Brandon Johnson. What's your read on how the nationalization of the race with those high profile endorsements worked in Johnson's favor, or if it was more just kind of neutral?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, as we've said, the main takeaway is the local ground game that they ran, but I think there's no doubt that those national endorsements definitely helped. With Clyburn's endorsement in particular, I mean, it's been proven that he has pull outside of South Carolina, such as when, he kind of intervened in the Ohio race with Nina Turner.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people did expect that was going to definitely carry sway with Black voters on the south side of Chicago, which, by the way, Brandon Johnson, as far as we know now, it seems won almost 80% of those voters, which was going to be crucial for him. So that's definitely part of what carried him to victory. I will say also, on the other side of this, there were high profile national endorsements that came in for Vallis, of course, towards the later stretch of the race, Senator Dick Durbin, and also Obama's former education secretary, Arnie Duncan, none of which, really ended up flipping the race. So I think another takeaway we probably should have is there's a way of reading this that, Johnson's victory kind of represents kind of the waning power of Obama world, perhaps, on the Democratic Party.
That's interesting. I mean, and encouraging, given, Rahm Emanuel has screwed off to his ambassador position.
Right.
I would say that a lot of people, I would nationally consider him a joke. If you're on the progressive left, and in Chicago, definitely anything that Rahm Emanuel probably has touched turns to shit because of his widely panned and disastrous record in the city. And so was that a part of Johnson's strategy? Did he try to tie Vallis to the old Obama political machine? Because Vallis has been around for a while, and his ambitions to be mayor have been widely recorded. So because he's tried it before. I mean, was that a part of some of the messaging that was seen on the ground in Chicago? Either of you guys can take this.
Yeah. Well, so just one quick point, and I'll let Jarod go. But in a direct way, you're actually completely right. So the attack was mainly directed at Lori Lightfoot during the primary. But, while all the other candidates were hitting her on, rising crime rates and such, Brandon Johnson criticized her very specifically on a set of mental health facilities that had been closed under Rahm Emanuel as part of this sort of broader austerity program across the city that Lightfoot had run on reopening in her race in 2019 and hadn't done so. And so that was, kind of part of his strategy and answer to the crime question. And he had this whole lane to himself of saying, why isn't the city investing in mental health facilities instead?
Yeah, I actually forgot about that little bit from the earlier race. That was a good point.
Right. So I mean that is notable, obviously, as you guys say. So in terms of the ground game and organizing, what did you observe as some of the most effective tactics? We know some of that going door to door, actually having face-to-face interaction with people can make all the difference in these kinds of races. But I know there were a variety of different groups organizing and doing work on behalf of Brandon Johnson. I mentioned the Working Families Party earlier. I think the Chicago Teachers Union endorsement, naturally massive, and a good repudiation of some of the national rhetoric we've seen directed at them for choosing to stand up for their rights in classroom environments that weren't necessarily safe due to COVID. What's your read on where the organizing was most effective and which organizations were doing the real heroic work of knocking on doors and making this case?
One of the people that we quoted in the story, Rocio Garcia, she's with United Working Families, and she's the one who really just was able to assemble a crew of volunteers who were going door knocking. But it didn't make it into the final piece. But there was one anecdote she was telling us about how earlier in the race that to take a step back, the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, their endorsement behind Vallis was that he's going to be anti-small business, that we need economic development. Economic development will bring down crime, sort of thing. But when I was talking to Rocio, she was telling me that I was like, what's your reaction to this idea that Brandon Johnson doesn't support small business? And she's telling me about how there's this kind of a flea market outdoor sort of mall thing that has a lot of vendors who one could arguably say that they are the bedrock of small business. These people don't really have they don't have a full storefront. So these are the most entrepreneurial types in the city, and that these people did not have any contact with the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who's supposedly supposed to be the ones representing them, but instead they had somebody like Brandon Johnson who's trying to talk with them and build relationships. So I think it's finding or identifying that in this case the Latino community, they're not just this universal group, that there's little sections to it, and going exactly to where they're at.
Gotcha. Luke, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically when it comes to the organizing strategies that the Johnson campaign deployed, specifically to court, Latino voters who were going to be really the swing vote in this race. Some of the backstory here is that the infamous political machine in Chicago had for decades run a very explicit strategy of trying to bridge white voters and Latino voters in the city to functionally offset the majority at the time in the city. And the system was fashioned by the young Mayor Daley in the 90s, who founded the Hispanic Democratic Organization. And the way it worked was that they essentially would hand out, city jobs to unemployed Latinos in exchange for sort of political support. And there was a huge federal investigation against the organization in the early 2000s that, led to several members of the organization going to jail. And officially, the Hispanic Democratic Organization disbanded. But, if you talk to people on the ground, that infrastructure has still kind of lasted. But now there's a younger generation of, sort of politically involved Latinos, and they have their own sort of political network. So this was really a kind of, a clash between the two to see who would win out.
Gotcha. And lastly here, Paul Vallis as a figure in Chicago, can you explain, either of you, what his history has been and where you think his brand of politics goes from here? Because I know he, for example, has been was instrumental in school closures outside of Chicago and other cities. This seems to be a bit of the mercenary quality that he brought to this race, but obviously they're going to have to regroup behind another more conservative Democratic candidate next time around. It's just, what does his loss really say about that brand of politics, particularly when it comes to his position on schools, which is so foundational to his background in politics? Either way, either one of you guys, go ahead.
Yeah, so Paul Vallas was the CEO of the public school system in Chicago. And had also been the budget director going back actually for the Young Mayor Daley that I mentioned before. So that was also part of his origins. But, in Chicago under Vallas's reign, there were a number of school closures and, the promotion of charter schools. And that had generally, I think, been the trend, for Vallas's, management style in New Orleans post-Katrina, and also in Philadelphia. There was another high-profile clash that people had mentioned during the race that Vallas really got hit for more or less not paying out full pension plans to teachers and other city staff as well. In Philadelphia, Vallas had also initiated sort of outsourcing of custodial staff at school. So that was his brand of kind of privatization. And I think that the Johnson campaign very effectively kind of rebutted that and made that a focus of their campaign, and voters responded.
It's like, who could have imagined that austerity is unpopular? I think that's kind of the big thing from it all.
The big takeaway. Right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. Jarod Facundo, Luke Goldstein, writing fellows at the American Prospect. You can read their work about this piece in particular on the Chicago race over at the American Prospect. Thank you guys so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, we are going to head into the fun half, where we will be having a lot of fun. We will be taking your calls, reading your IMs. I will quite aggressively attack Barry Weiss because she's up on my list these days of people that I would like to turn into a national or maybe even international embarrassment. Her transphobic outlet and what they've done with this one particular story is something that we need to unpack in the fun half. We'll also be talking about Kid Rock shooting a bunch of Bud Light, Matt Walsh finding AOC's burner, which wasn't her actual burner, some other fun stories. But again, just a reminder, please support this show, become a member, join themajorityreport.com. Click on that QR code that you might have seen at one point in the show on our break screen. It really is super important to support us. Our members are, if you like our work, our members are really everything to us, because being at the whims of the YouTube algorithm or other corporations like who can demonetize a video, it's kind of beyond our control. That creates some instability. But having you guys as members is everything to keeping the show afloat and running. So please, if you can, totally okay if you can't, but if you can, become a member, join themajorityreport.com, and go to shop.majorityreportradio.com. Get those limited edition shirts that we spoke about earlier. They are fire, okay? And on ESVN, my sports show, if you haven't heard, youtube.com/ESVN show, we spoke about the controversy surrounding Angel Reese deciding to trash talk Caitlin Clark, who, by the way, yesterday came out and said she didn't have a problem with it, but Dave Portnoy and other right-wingers decided to white knight for her regardless. We broke that down, the importance that brings to women's sports, women's basketball in particular. We also spoke about Jeff Bezos trying to strong-arm the NFL on Thursday Night Football, and a bunch of other topics. Bradley ranted about why the MVP race in the NBA has to be this like zero-sum game and drama-filled garbage for First Take and things like that. YouTube.com/ESVN show. And Left Reckoning was last night, so I hear. Do you know who was on? Bradley? Bradley's going to find it.
But yeah, check out youtube.com/left reckoning for the latest there. And patreon.com/left reckoning for the post game. It looks like last night David Griscom and Matt talked about all of the happenings that we were discussing in Tennessee on the Majority Report yesterday, and then also spoke with Keith Brower Brown to talk about recent changes with leadership at the United Auto Workers and the fight to reform the labor movement. So youtube.com/left reckoning, patreon.com/left reckoning for the post game. And also just to mention, check out our TikTok, Majority Report FM. That's our handle. Our good pal Isaac is at the helm of the TikTok. He's been doing some great work on there. We've gotten some good engagement there. And I just wanted to mention, because we hadn't yet and I wanted to officially amquickie.com, of course, sign up for the AM Quickie if you want if you want the paid membership to get access to all of the issues Monday through Friday, but it's free 2 days a week if not. Just wanted to give a big introduction to Robert Hitt, who was our new AM Quickie writer, who replaced the friend of the show, esteemed MR crew MR crew emeritus Jack Crosby. Bob has been a great addition, and he's had his first full week at the AM Quickie just last week. So very happy to have Bob on board with the crew.
Good plug. All right. We're going to head into the fun half. 646-257-3920 is the phone number. We'll be taking your calls, reading your IMs. As I say, we might need to take a little break before the fun half starts, so don't freak out if there's some break music. It's just we're just two people running the show, so things are moving a little slower. We will see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what?
What?
Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little party hustle? Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.